Yeah, you got it.
Okay. All right. When you guys, I remember what I was going to say now. So when you guys go to take the big fat Whopper 7 Habits test, one of the first questions is going to be, actually the first question is going to be to list the 7 habits and define them. So the official definition of being proactive, and somewhere in the book, let's see what page it's on. Yes.
Just on the first two.
Well, everything from the introduction, everything we've done up through the end of the first 2 bits. Okay, so,
Did you break your glasses?
I did. Well, they broke a few days ago, and every so often I have to try and put the thing back on. They just broke in my hand. I don't know what page the definitions are on, but more or less the definition is to take responsibility.
Here I have it, page 5.
Page 5. Good. That's a good page for you guys to know about. Take responsibility for your life. So you cannot control the circumstances you may find yourself in, but you can control how you react to those circumstances. That's what being proactive is about. And that you do.
It's not on you. It's just like on half your face.
Is that better?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
So, if you don't have your homework done for class on a given day, who's responsible? Us. If you do have your homework done on a given day, who's responsible? Us. And there's many more examples. One way to start, though, thinking about being proactive is the difference between being reactive and proactive. And I had given some consideration to actually demonstrating this with some bottled beverages, but I'll just describe it. Has anyone read the chapter? How is it that they describe? Matt?
It's between like water and soda, right? And you shake one and it will like fizz up and explode.
Yep.
And like if you shake water, it's going to stay the same.
Yes. Back when my girls were at St. Tim's and they had dances at St. Tim's and the parents had to volunteer, so I went to volunteer once for the dance and I walk in and they put me in charge of the soda station. And here's an important lesson I learned. You know how the 6th graders had to bring salty snacks and the 7th, yeah. So the 7th graders had to bring the drinks. So the 7th grade girls would come in with their soda and put it on the table. And the 7th grade boys would come in and put their soda on the table. And I very quickly learned that any bottles of soda brought in by the 7th grade girls, I could open in the room. Any bottle of soda brought by a 7th grade boy, I had to step outside. Because every single one of them shook it up, just by their very being. And seltzer is very explosive, seltzer. So, shake a bottle of water all you want, and when you open it, nothing's going to happen. That person is proactive. They've got control of their emotions and their responses. It doesn't mean that a person who is a bottle of water doesn't experience anger or frustration or being flustered. It's just that they don't explode. A good example of someone who's reactive, just, you look at them wrong and it's just this, you get seltzer all over you. They can't control their emotions and they react first. That's where reactive comes from. They react first before they think. A very good example of someone who I think is proactive would be John Glasscock. Because if you remember at the prayer service last week for World Peace, lots of things in terms of the audiovisual were going wrong at the beginning of the prayer service. John just went ahead and spoke without the microphone and did his thing, and then halfway through when the microphone came on, he just seamlessly, he didn't even comment on it necessarily. He may have said a little something, but then he knew that meant that the video was going to be there. So even his script got changed in the middle of the prayer service, and he just kind of went with it. Beautiful example of someone who is proactive in terms of not letting, you could shake John up all you like. I don't think you will ever get an explosion out of him. Okay, so that's an important bit. Yeah, you can give him a round of applause. He's a good guy. Sorry to have embarrassed you, John.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, so now they get to see the video of my one-armed glasses, but I can't see without them. If you happen to have your book with you, turn to page 51. Do pay attention to page 50 because those make for some really terrific quiz questions about reactive and proactive choices in a situation. But that down at the bottom, page 51, that chart where they give you some examples of reactive and proactive language. I'll try, that's just the way I am, there's nothing I can do, I have to, I can't, you ruined my day. Those are all examples of reactive language. I'll do it, I can do better than that, let's look at our options, I choose to, there's gotta be a way, I'm not gonna let your bad mood rub off on me. That's all proactive. That's not, okay, that's all proactive. An example of this in my own life was when I was in high school, I was the sophomore class president. And our high school homecoming, every class was in charge of some aspect of homecoming, and the sophomore class was in charge of the big bonfire, which meant that we had to, get the wood and all that kind of stuff. So what I didn't know was that the school administration had decided my sophomore year that they no longer wanted the bonfire. But rather than telling us that they didn't want the bonfire, they decided that they were going to make things so difficult for us that we would fail in putting it together, and then there just wouldn't be a bonfire. But I didn't know this. So what I knew was that I was the class president. We were in charge of having a bonfire. So the first thing they said to us was, well, you have to get a permit from someplace. Not knowing that I was supposed to fail, I said, okay. And I made phone calls, and I got my mom to drive me places. I got the permit, I came back, here's the permit. They were a little surprised. So they said, oh, well, you have to get permission from this other person as well. Why didn't you tell me to start with? It would have been nice, but okay. So I went out, I got this other permit. I forget the third thing, but then the final thing was, okay, well, you have to have this much wood. And it was an incredible quantity of wood. So, normally what we did was we just had everybody who came bring a log, but now they wanted all this wood. So my committee, I went back to the committee and I said, well, now they want us to have all this wood. And we came up with the idea that there was a trucking company somewhere in town, and somebody said they've got all these pallets, behind the trucking company they just want to throw out. So we called them, they said we could have the pallets. We got all our moms in their station wagons. When I grew up, you drew station wagons, not vans. And we had this caravan of station wagons down to the trucking company. We loaded all the station wagons up with pallets. We brought them back. And I'm not exaggerating. The pile of pallets was from here to the ceiling. And to top it off, my dad still had our old Christmas tree from the Christmas before sitting around in the backyard. Topped it off with the Christmas tree. Have any of you ever set a Christmas tree on fire?
It's like explodes.
It explodes.
Yeah.
It's like fireworks. So let me tell you, we had the best bonfire in the history of Brookfield High School. And Brookfield is on a series of hills, and the high school is at the top of one of them. You could see that fire for miles because people commented later.
You just lit the pile?
We lit the pile. We lit the pile. Well, but it was this tall with this tree on top. It was really spectacular.
How'd you get it up there? Yeah, how did you?
Oh, I'm not sure how my dad got it up there, but it was up there. So after that bonfire, the administration said, that was great, no more bonfires. But it's an example of, I was only proactive because I didn't know I had an option to not be proactive. But, whatever the obstacle was, it's my job to get it done, I'll get it done. Another time, several years ago, my church used to have a bazaar, which, they had rides and booths and food and stuff. And the way my parish is built is there's this upper parking lot, and then it goes downhill, and the school is like this. So the cafeteria is actually in the lower level of the school, and you'd have to go downstairs to get there if you went in this door, but you could just walk in from this level. And all the fun stuff was over here. they were having a special dinner in the cafeteria, and my father-in-law came with us to have the special dinner. And he had emphysema. So he could only walk maybe 4 or 5 steps before he couldn't breathe anymore. He had to stop and wait. And we didn't think about this much when we took him to the dinner because we were able to drive him pretty close to the door and drop him off. But after dinner, Sarah and Amy, who were little, wanted to go up and ride the rides. And Fred, my father-in-law, there was no way he was going to be able to walk up even this little hill up to where we could sit and watch the kids on the rides, and he couldn't walk up the stairs either. So he sadly said, well, why don't you just take me home? And my husband was like, okay, I'll take you home. But I could tell that Fred didn't want to go home because he was going to go home and he was going to be alone. He wanted to, stay with us. So what was that one proactive thing? Let's look at our options. Let's find a way to do it. Of course, at a place like this, you've got the fire truck sitting there, right? The whole time for safety reasons. I said, I'm going to go up and talk to the firemen. I'm going to see if they can back the fire truck down and you can get in the fire truck and then they just drive you up the hill. And Fred and Jerry were like, that's so silly. I said, no, I'm going to try it. So I went up to the firemen. I said, my father-in-law can't walk up the hill. Would you back down? And they said, well, no, we can't do that with the fire truck. But here's a police car. So the police car drove down. He got in the car. They drove him up to the top of the hill. And then Fred and I sat together and at a table and watched the girls go on all the rides. And he really shared with me that night in a way that we had never had a conversation before about his late wife and, some of his frustrations with his medical condition. It was just really a nice evening. That wouldn't have happened if we had just said, all right, well, we'll give up. So that's what being proactive is about as well. Not just taking responsibility, but also, not looking at almost every situation has a way to solve the problem. My mother was an art major, and one of the things I grew up being taught by her was that there really are very few mistakes when you're doing art that can't be made into something else, that you can't somehow work around. The smallest example was one time I got a shirt, just those big comfy shirts that you like to wear. It was a hand-me-down actually from Fred, but it had some drips of paint on the sleeve. But I was pregnant at the time, and so the shirt was the perfect size, and it was really nice to keep me warm. And my mother came to visit and took her paintbrush and turned all the little drips of paint on the sleeve into a vine with flowers, and then it became a really cool shirt. So it's just a really neat way of thinking of things, that there are very few situations in life that you can't come up with some options. Sometimes, all of the options are going to be difficult, but there are options. So that's all part of being proactive. Does anybody have any questions about being proactive? Nope, you understand it completely? So now this is a very important diagram. I remember I made that diagram last week with the circle within the circle.
Mm-hmm.
This is a second diagram with a circle within a circle. So be careful when you're studying not to get the two diagrams mixed up. That other one was about what the center of your life should be. And this one doesn't even have to be a circle. This could be kind of like a blob, except they do call it a circle. So this here is called the circle of control, and this is the circle of no control. And this diagram illustrates where you should spend your energy. You should spend all of your energy as a proactive person on your circle of control, the things that you can control. And you should not spend one drop of your energy on the things in your circle of no control. Now, do you guys remember some things that would be in your circle of control? Yes?
Ourselves, responses, and attitudes.
Exactly. Exactly. And things that are not in your control?
Like the weather, like your skin.
Right, those kinds of things. We have no control over the weather today. You have no control of, what you do have some control, I suppose, over your hair color, but in general, the idea is that, just the way your body turned out, is not in your control. And to go back to what Anna said, I have control over my responses. I don't have any control over somebody else's responses. So if I say something to someone and they don't like what they hear, I don't have any control over their reaction to that, right? When I was a first-year teacher here, believe it or not, I had some trouble getting along with some of my colleagues, with a colleague in particular. And it was someone that I had to work with very closely. And another one of my colleagues, a French teacher who's not here now, but beautiful woman, like in spirit, in all ways, just Mrs. Keenan, kind of took me under her wing and helped me to grow up a lot. And one of the things that Mrs. Keenan taught me was to say, in certain situations, I am sorry you feel that way. Now, you have to be careful how you use this because you don't want it to come off as snarky or disrespectful. But it is actually a very useful phrase, even if you don't say it, even if you just think it. I'm sorry you feel that way. But that can be your reaction to the fact that you can't control how other people feel. I'm sorry you feel that way, but that's not going to change the situation. Let's take college applications, for example. What aspect of the college application process is in your control? Let's see if we get different answers from different people. So 1, 2, 3.
So you have control of like writing your essay, filling out the Common App, like doing all of that ahead of time.
Okay.
And you can't really choose though whether you're accepted into college or not.
Matt or Anna, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, like, in terms of studying for the SAT, you can be like proactive.
Right, you're in control of your preparation anyway. Anna, anything else?
You're like in control of like your studies and like what your cumulative GPA is, like you control that. That would be like in the past, and you control that now, and then when you're filling that out, like you can't change it.
Right, hopefully you took control of that
Yeah.
3 years ago. Okay, so once you've done what you've done in high school, you've prepared the best you can and taken the SATs, you've filled out the Common App and written your essay, and you push that send button. Now, what's the case with your college application?
So you out of
It's
control.
no longer in your control. So once you click send, in the perfect world, would you spend another minute worrying about your college application?
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't. It will make you crazy. It will keep you awake at night, and you have no control over it. And if you've done any studying of how college admissions work, it's a little bit arbitrary. So you have no control. You have no control. So don't worry about it. If you have a quiz tomorrow in here on the 7 habits, what part of that quiz do you have any control over? How much you study, whether you've read the book. What don't you have any control over?
Questions on it?
The questions on it, right. You do the best you can with the part that you can control, right? My sister, she's not as bad now, but at one point in her life, her moods were very dependent on whether the Yukon Husky women basketball team won or lost.
But wouldn't they always win? So.
Well, most of the time she would be in a good mood.
Uh-huh.
But there were times when if they were playing like Tennessee, back when they used to play Tennessee, she would be so overwrought that she would go, and actually she still does this, if there's a big game, she makes plans to go to a movie or someplace where she doesn't have to hear what's going on with the game until the game is over. And then if they win, she will have recorded it. She watches the game if they won. If they lost, she's in a foul mood and she doesn't watch it.
Wow.
But there was a time when she used to even watch the games, and she just completely loses control. She has matured a little bit. But does she have any control at all over whether the Yukon Huskies win or lose?
No.
None at all. None at all. Another example, and again, I haven't followed this news story completely. Have you followed anything at all about the security breaches at the White House recently?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit? Well, the person who was in charge of the Secret Service was called before a Senate panel the other day.
She quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She did resign, but before she resigned, what I heard her quoted as saying was, "This shouldn't have happened, and I take responsibility." She didn't say anything about, well, you know, morale is bad, or our budget's been cut, or, you know, we haven't been able to do this or that because of this or that. She said, it shouldn't have happened, I take responsibility. Hard to do. It meant she lost her job, you know, as possibly she should have, but, you know, I don't know all this, again, I don't know the whole story, but it sounded to me like she was someone who was being proactive. It was a bad situation, but she took responsibility, which was, you know, where her responsibility was. So that was a good, like, big term role model. All right, let's see what else is here. Turning setbacks into triumphs. This is really important. There's actually a couple of little points here. We can only control a thing, turning setbacks into triumphs. Do pay attention to, like, the titles here, because those are pithy little phrases. Become a change agent. I like that one too. Aha. Page 63. The other way to distinguish between a proactive person and a reactive person. A proactive person is a can-do person, and a reactive person is a no-can-do. I think I told you my two little stories too early. They were actually meant for page 63. So, getting the bonfire done, getting my father-in-law up to the bazaar. I do think I have a can-do attitude. There's got to be a way that things can happen. I rarely take no for an answer in terms of, like, making things happen. I generally have an idea that there's got to be a way to make it happen. Setbacks into triumphs, and I'm sorry that I keep using myself as an example. Please, if you guys can think of another one. When I was first started teaching here, I took a job as a youth minister at a parish in West Hartford. And I was very young, and I was very new at all of this. And I did a terrible job, and I got fired at the end of the year, which you would think was a setback. But it was really an excellent setback, because what did I learn from this?
Learned that what you were doing wasn't the correct way to do things.
Exactly. And so and it had not as much to do with the kids as it did with how I interacted with the other people in the organization. So I learned a lot about how to come into a new situation, how to initiate change, how to work as a team member. It was really a very good thing for me to have been fired from that job, because then it set me up to be a better prepared to then become the director of campus ministry here. I was a Spanish teacher. It was Mrs. Sibley was who I was at that time, the first 5 years I taught here. So it set me up to be a better person in the position that I'm in now. That would not have happened without that setback. Have you guys heard that poem about the guy who never really went to school, started a business, it failed, ran for public office, didn't get elected, started another business and that failed, ran for another public office and didn't get elected. His girlfriend, who he was engaged to, dumped him. His life was a disaster until he was elected president. Do you know who I'm talking about? Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's life was a series of failures until he was elected president. Even then, I guess he probably had some difficulties. But he always learned something from all of those things, those setbacks, and it made him stronger, and he forged ahead. Matt?
P.T. Barnum has similar lifestyle like that.
Oh, yes, and you would know more about that. Expound on that.
He started a business. It was like the Great Emporium or something like that
Mhm.
along those lines, and that went up in flames. And then he tried to run for mayor, and that failed. And then he met Bailey, and they started a circus. Oh yeah, his wife dies.
Yep.
And then they start the circus.
Okay. So, and he ended up being a very successful businessman. And didn't he eventually become the mayor? No. Or is that just in the play? Well, but another excellent example. Sometimes the setbacks are necessary. Well, even in terms of the Yukon Husky women's basketball team. When they win too many games, they start getting sloppy. Every so often, I think you need a loss. Because you learn more when you lose than you do when you win. And there's actually, this is a helpful phrase, I don't know if you've ever heard this before. When you're playing in some kind of a competition, you either win or you learn. I think that's quite profound. Ooh, John, did you ever hear that?
I was gonna say that another thing on the failure is the guy who started JCPenney's
Oh.
went bankrupt 7 times before he got to
Ah.
it, and then he died for like tens of millions.
Another great example.
Yeah.
Matt?
You were saying about how losses are sometimes good. There's a, they were talking about it last year with the college basketball teams.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of teams that go undefeated for a while, they'll actually, the coaches can sometimes want their team to lose right before the playoffs so that they don't get too complacent and cocky about how they're playing, and they can kind of learn
My
from
team,
their
the
loss.
Olympic hockey team, they, Soviet Union,
Uh-huh.
a pregame, and they lost, like 12-3.
So that was better for them.
Yeah, it was like,
Great. Well, thank you guys very much.
Like, if I take my binder?
Oh, yes.